County event of Black History Month hosted by Brother Carl Muhammad. I would like to take this opportunity to honor and commend this astonishing group of outstanding leaders for making a positive difference within our community. Palm Beach County truly treasures organizations such as yours. The continued dedication your group exemplified down through the years has strengthened the lives of many individuals in Palm Beach County. Your commitment to having a positive impact on our community is more than worthy of recognition. Organizations like yours serve as examples to us all to continue to overcome obstacles and strive for the best. Best wishes for a spectacular event.
And now, as a result of the things that are happening inside of Palm Beach County, when we looked at the shock report, we looked at the graduation rate of African American males inside of Palm Beach County, and we're looking at how can we galvanize ourselves and put ourselves in a place where we can help our babies that are located in public schools. We went out and brought our big brother, Dr.Umar Abdullah Johnson, to Palm Beach County. And this message will be delivered to the school board and to the superintendent of Palm Beach County and to the many organizations that we have inside of Palm Beach County, with hopes that possibly we might be able to take the real lead and lead the state of Florida and the other 66 counties that are located in the state of Florida and make some real gain before this year is up. And at this time, I want to bring to the idea, to the thought process, our big brother, Dr. Umar Abdullah Johnson.
Good morning to everyone, and my name is Dr. Umar Abdullah Johnson, and I would like to speak about a few things that I think would be very important for the City of Riviera Beach as well as the local school board to consider in terms of improving the educational outcomes for African children, African American and Hispanic boys in particular. First issue relates to the classroom instructors. The research tells us, and it's very clear, that teachers tend to pay the most attention to the children in the classroom who look the most like their own. We also know that children tend to pay the most attention to teachers who look the most like themselves. When we look at the dropout rate of African American children, and particularly African American and Hispanic boys, we have to begin to understand that that dropout is not exclusively due to a lack of concern for their education on part of the learner. There's also a disconnect between the instructee and the instructor. One of the things that the school district of the city is going to need to do to improve retention for African American children and the boys in particular is to embark upon a massive, a well-funded, and well-ran African American male teacher recruitment campaign. It has to deliberately go out to the colleges around this country, particularly the historically black colleges and universities, because that's where most of our African American teachers are learning, and deliberately seek to recruit them and bring them into the district as classroom teachers. Many school districts across the country have brought African American males in as classroom aides. However, this is not effective enough because aide is reduced to a helper of the teacher. The aide is simply someone whose job is to carry out the ambitions, the goals, and the directives of the teacher. So because they have no autonomy of their own, simply bringing African American males into the classroom as aides and assistants really isn't going to yield much academic potential. What we need to do is bring them in as classroom teachers, particularly in the critical middle school grades, 4th, 5th, and 6th. Obviously 7th, 8th, and 9th, and of course 10th, 11th, and 12th. But the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, with the disconnect between the instructee and the instructor is greatest, that's where we should concentrate on bringing our African American male teachers into to intervene in this problem. We know that when the African American boy is not able to read at the conclusion of the 4th or the 5th grade, there's a 75% chance that he'll end up in prison in the next 10 to 15 years. So to counteract that, we need to make sure we're giving our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade African-American boys, African-American male teachers. Now, obviously, such a recommendation is going to bring some potential backlash, probably from the teachers union, probably from other types of special interest groups. But the question we have to ask ourselves is whether we're really trying to solve this problem of African-American male dropout and failure, or whether we just want to give the appearance that we're trying to solve it. If we really want to solve it, then we have to give those boys, men, teachers who look exactly like them. That's not to take anything away from instructors from other racial backgrounds, but the bottom line is we are in a state of crisis with our African American boys. Because we are in a state of crisis, we must do exactly what has to be done in order to save them. And every African American boy in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, even if we cannot provide them a African-American male teacher for the remainder of their educational career going up to 12th grade, if we could just give them an African-American male teacher in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, then I think that we will begin to see that a lot of the academic failure and dropout will begin to stabilize and then ultimately reduce itself. So bringing African-American male teachers in, particularly in those key transitional, the 4th, 5th, and 6th, is the first thing your district needs to look to do. It doesn't matter how well educated a teacher is. It doesn't matter how many years she's had in the district. It doesn't matter how culturally sensitive she may be. In order to reach African American males effectively, you have to give them African American male teachers. Yes, other teachers can be effective, but maximum effectiveness. We need maximum effectiveness for a maximum problem, and that is going to require African-American male teachers, and there's no way to get around it. The next issue relates to the overdiagnosis and misdiagnosis of African-American and Hispanic children, particularly Black and Hispanic boys, as mentally retarded, and the underdiagnosis of African-American and Hispanic boys as mentally gifted. So in this country, we have a statistic where the African-American boy is 4 times as likely to be diagnosed as retarded than a European-American kid, and 4 times less likely to be diagnosed as mentally gifted. And so it becomes a requirement for all of us to create task force whose job, or committees, whatever we would like to call it, whose exclusive job is to review any recommendation for an evaluation of mental retardation on African American and Hispanic children, with an emphasis on the boys. Far too many African American and far too many Hispanic boys are being diagnosed as mentally retarded. When we look at the evaluations where these young men are being diagnosed as retarded, we're finding that the evaluations are often faulty. We know that you cannot classify a child as retarded simply because the IQ score is below 70. Below 70 is considered intellectually deficient on most cognitive measures. However, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act of 2004, our current special education law, requires not only that the child have an IQ score below 70, but also that there be evidence of some adaptive behavior on part of the child. In other words, an IQ score alone is not sufficient to diagnose mental retardation. There must be evidence that the child, clear evidence that the child is impaired in some major life functioning area, whether it's communication, whether it's daily living, whether it's self-help, whether it's community navigation, whether it's functional academics. They must be impaired. Not just on an IQ test, but impaired in their functional ability. Intelligence at its basic level is the ability to adapt to an environment. And if we find no evidence of the child's inability to adapt to the various environments in which they find themselves throughout the daily day, from school to home, to the community, to the after-school program, if we don't find any evidence of impaired adaptability, then we cannot diagnose mental retardation. The reason the special ed law requires evidence of adaptive impairment is because most intelligence tests are culturally biased. it is not uncommon for an African American child to come up with an IQ score less than 70 because the verbal scale of most IQs are based on information from middle class white experience, not black experience. And as a result of that, a black child is likely to end up with a very low verbal IQ score, which can ultimately pull down their full scale intelligence quotient. So whenever a child is referred for mental retardation, those referrals should go into a special file. They should be reviewed before they are approved by the principal, the director of special ed, the special ed liaison, whomever you have over the special ed process. They need to be studied, they need to be scrutinized, and those referrals for mental retardation evaluation should be rejected if we do not have clear evidence up front of adaptive impairment. This will save time, it will save effort, and most of all, it will save us from misdiagnosing a child. Once these labels go on the child, even when they are peeled off, it is difficult to peel off the stigma. It is difficult to peel off the low self-esteem that a false mental retardation label can induce in a child. Along that same spectrum, we need to include mental giftedness, MG. Mental giftedness also needs to be included as a responsibility of that particular committee or task force. They should review every mental gifted referral, and if there are not enough, then there needs to be a protocol put in place that heightens the need for the district to find gifted children. Now, we know that mental giftedness is no longer a diagnosable condition under special ed law, but it is still a diagnosable condition. And one of the things that we need to do is to make sure that we are referring enough African American and Hispanic children, boys and girls, for gifted evaluation and placement. You're probably going to ask me, why is this relevant? Why is finding mentally gifted children important? I'll tell you why. When children who are gifted are forced to stay in a classroom that is not challenging, then their thirst for education begins to dull. Their degree of hyperactivity and inattention begins to increase. And when these children are not provided with a stimulating education, which maximizes their cognitive potential, they will not only become or can become delinquent, their grades will begin to suffer. I have evaluated dozens of African American and Hispanic children, and even white children for that matter, who are not being adequately challenged in the classroom. And one thing we know is that when a child is not adequately challenged in the classroom, they will stop working because they don't see a need to participate in the instruction. I'm finding that too many instructors, too many principals, too many educators are not referring African American and Hispanic children who clearly appear to be gifted because of behavioral issues. It is a violation of the child's educational right to be denied a gifted education because of their behavioral problem. One of the reasons why it is a denial of their educational right is because behavior problems are the natural outgrowth of a gifted child who's not being challenged adequately. Approximately 25% of your behaviorally challenged children in this district are simply behaviorally challenged because they are actually mentally gifted. They have above average, superior, and very superior intelligence. They have academic needs that are not being met in the classroom, and as a result of that, their behavior is declining. So we need to create that task force, mental retardation and mental giftedness. You can have two separate task forces, but I don't see a problem with both of them being under the same umbrella because they both deal with the concept of intelligence. Children who are not being diagnosed as gifted, who really are, and children who are being diagnosed as retarded, who really are not. When a child is evaluated for gifted, that task force should be responsible for reviewing that evaluation to make sure if that child did not qualify, if they did not qualify for gifted, then that evaluation and that intelligence test needs to be scrutinized to make sure that the evaluating psychologist did not intentionally or unintentionally fail to qualify that child for gifted when they should have. I'm finding that a lot of African American and Hispanic children who have IQ, full scale intelligence scores of less than 130, which is considered to be the nationally recognized cutoff for gifted placement,
When the child falls a few points below 130, many psychologists are saying that they don't qualify for gifted. You are not allowed to use a score all by itself to diagnose giftedness or mental retardation, but too many psychologists are doing that. So if you have a student of color with a 125 IQ, 5 points below the very superior